Welcome to Life Stories, where we share inspiring tales of resilience, love, and personal growth. Today, we bring you the story of Sophie, a young woman who endured hardship, betrayal, and a life of servitude, only to find a path to happiness and fulfillment she never imagined. From a loving family that turned cold to a surprising twist that led to true love and success. Sophie's journey teaches us about the strength of the human spirit and the power of inner transformation. Stay with us as we explore her incredible story. Don't forget to subscribe to start today's story with Life Stories. Sophie was only 5 years old when she was taken in by Jack and Ellen. They had been married for over a decade, and their hearts ached with the absence of children. After years of trying and countless visits to doctors, they had nearly lost hope. Sophie, with her dark skin and deep brown eyes, stepped into their lives like a tiny ray of light in a world that had grown dim with longing. She was a quiet child, with a shy smile and a presence that immediately filled the space in their hearts. From the moment she entered their home, Jack loved her as his own. Ellen, too, embraced Sophie with open arms, her maternal instincts kicking in as she looked at the little girl, who was now their daughter. They lived in a quiet suburban town, a place where the streets were lined with old oak trees and the air always seemed filled with the sounds of children playing in the distance. Their home, modest but full of warmth, was a place where love seemed to linger in every corner. It wasn't long before Sophie became the heart of their home, and Jack and Ellen poured all their love into her. The years passed, and just when they thought they had reached the peak of their happiness, a miracle occurred. Ellen, much to their surprise, became pregnant with a baby girl. They named her Lily. It was a moment of pure joy, one that was shared with friends and family, who celebrated alongside them, marveling at the arrival of this new life. Jack often looked at Sophie with pride, calling her his lucky charm. He would hold her close during these celebrations and whisper, "See what you brought into our lives, my dear Sophie," smiling as if she were the greatest gift he had ever received. Sophie adored her new sister from the start. She would sit by Lily's crib, humming soft lullabies, watching her sister sleep with love-filled eyes. It was clear to Jack and Ellen that Sophie's heart was as pure as gold. As she whispered to the tiny baby, "I'll always take care of you," they never doubted for a moment that their home had become more than just a place to live. It had become a haven filled with love, where two sisters could grow up side by side, surrounded by the adoration of their parents. And just when they thought their family was complete, another miracle came to them. A year later, Clara was born. The house, once quiet and calm, now buzzed with the noise of children's laughter and the joyful chaos that came with raising a young family. Sophie, though still a child herself, embraced her role as the eldest sister with a maturity beyond her years. She would help Ellen with the babies, rushing to fetch diapers when needed, and keeping Clara entertained with funny faces and gentle coos. Life in their home felt perfect. Jack, with his quiet pride, looked around often, marveling at the family he had. He couldn't have imagined that the love and joy they had would one day fade. But for now, their lives were full of light. It was a warmth that spread through the home, touching every part of their lives. And no one, not even Jack, could have foreseen how quickly that warmth would be snuffed out. The years went by, and Sophie grew into a bright, hard-working teenager. She excelled in her studies and was admired by her teachers and peers. She worked hard at school, and Jack remained her biggest supporter, always encouraging her to chase her dreams, no matter how far-fetched they might seem. Sophie's determination shone through in everything she did. She would often stay up late studying, determined to be the best version of herself. She dreamed of attending a prestigious university and making her family proud. Little did she know, her dreams were about to be shattered. One fateful evening, Sophie called Jack to let him know that she was ready to be picked up from school. It had started raining heavily, and she asked him to drive carefully. Jack reassured her with a warm smile in his voice, promising that he would be there soon. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. On his way to pick her up, a speeding truck lost control and collided with Jack's car. By the time help arrived, it was too late. The news of Jack's death shattered their world. At the funeral, Ellen wept uncontrollably, clutching Lily and Clara close to her. But Sophie stood apart, her tears falling silently as she held onto a photograph of Jack. The grief that consumed the family was unimaginable. It was as though the foundation of their entire world had crumbled beneath them, leaving them to pick up the pieces of their broken hearts. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of their loss settled heavily over the household. Ellen's sorrow soon morphed into bitterness. She couldn't understand how Sophie, the daughter who had once brought so much joy into their lives, had become the source of her pain. And so, in her anguish, Ellen turned on Sophie, her heart hardened by grief. "Don't call me that," Ellen snapped when Sophie tried to comfort her, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and pain. "You're not my child." From that moment on, Ellen's warmth disappeared. She became distant and cruel, treating Sophie as if she were a stranger. Sophie, though heartbroken, obeyed her mother's every command. The house that had once been filled with laughter now felt cold and empty. As if Sophie had lost more than just a father, she had lost her place in the family as well. But through it all, Sophie remained strong. She helped take care of Lily and Clara. Despite the cruelty she endured from Ellen, she clung to the memories of the family they had been, hoping that someday, things might return to the warmth they once knew. But deep down, she knew things had changed forever. And this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her strength in ways she never could have imagined. The years that followed Jack's death were nothing short of painful for Sophie. With each passing day, Ellen's cruelty grew, and the once warm, loving home had turned into a place of tension and sorrow. Ellen's bitterness manifested in sharp words and cold stares. Sophie, now a young woman, became the family's servant. She was expected to clean, cook, and take care of Lily and Clara while her mother, consumed by grief and anger, seemed to carry on as though Sophie no longer mattered. Sophie tried to carry the burden silently, avoiding confrontation, but her heart broke each time Ellen spoke to her with cold indifference. It was as if Sophie had been erased from her mother's heart, replaced by a stranger who no longer had a place in the home they had once shared. Yet, Sophie continued to do everything her mother asked without protest. Her love for Lily and Clara, her younger sisters, was the only thing that kept her going. She did everything she could for them, hoping they would somehow understand that she still cared, that she still loved them despite everything that had changed. But the pain never ceased. Ellen, who had once embraced Sophie as her daughter, now treated her like an outsider. Sophie's efforts to hold the family together were in vain. Her every action seemed to be met with scorn, and the walls that had once held their laughter and love began to close in around her. The contrast between the way Sophie was treated and the way her sisters lived their lives became impossible to ignore. Lily and Clara, though still young, began to take full advantage of their mother's affection and their newfound privileges. They went to parties, dressed in expensive clothes, and lived a carefree life while Sophie stayed home to clean up after them. Often well into the night, Sophie would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how things had gone so terribly wrong. What had happened to the family they had once been? Why had her mother turned against her so completely? The more she reflected on it, the more the feeling of betrayal consumed her. But she couldn't escape the reality of her situation. She was trapped. Leaving would mean losing everything, her home, her sisters, and the love she had once shared with Jack. Sophie felt as though she was slowly fading into the background, her presence in the house almost invisible to everyone, especially Ellen. One fateful afternoon, Sophie was sent to the market by Ellen to buy groceries. As she walked through the crowded streets, carrying a heavy basket, she tried to clear her mind of the anguish that constantly weighed on her heart. It was then that she noticed a man watching her from across the street. He stood tall and confident, his sharp features and well-tailored suit standing out in contrast to the bustling crowd. As he approached, Sophie felt an unease settle in her chest. She wasn't used to attention, especially not from strangers. "Excuse me," the man called out, his voice smooth and confident. "What's your name?" Sophie hesitated, clutching her basket tightly to her chest. She didn't want to get into a conversation with a stranger, especially not when she was already feeling overwhelmed by everything happening in her life. "I'm Sophie," she replied softly, avoiding his gaze. The man smiled warmly. Introducing himself as Henry, he said she looked like someone special. But Sophie, feeling both flattered and uncomfortable, quickly excused herself, hurrying away before he could say anything more. Despite her hasty exit, something about Henry lingered in her mind. She had never had anyone speak to her in such a kind and respectful way. And it left her feeling conflicted. She couldn't afford to let anyone into her life. Not now. Not when her mother's wrath was always hanging over her head. Yet Henry, intrigued by Sophie's quiet grace, couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. He followed her at a distance, wanting to know where she lived. And when Sophie arrived home, he watched from across the street. His curiosity piqued. Little did she know, this encounter would mark the beginning of a turn in her life, one that would bring both complications and opportunities she never expected. The next day, Henry made a bold decision to visit Sophie's home. As he knocked on the door, Ellen answered, and at the sight of his expensive suit and confident demeanor, she was immediately taken aback. She invited him in, intrigued by this mysterious man who seemed to be so interested in her daughter. When Henry introduced himself and said he had met Sophie the day before, Ellen's smile faltered. She quickly dismissed the idea that Sophie could be involved with someone like him. Oh no, Ellen laughed nervously. You must be mistaken. Sophie isn't suited for someone like you. Henry's gaze softened as he defended Sophie. I don't believe that. She's humble and kind. She's different. Ellen, however, was not swayed. She leaned in closer, her voice filled with condescension. A man like you deserves someone more refined. Someone like my daughter, Lily. She's educated, well-mannered, and fits your world perfectly. As Lily overheard the conversation and joined them, she added her own lies, claiming that Sophie was already engaged to someone else. Sophie, standing quietly in the kitchen, overheard everything. Her face burned with humiliation. But fear kept her from speaking up. Ellen had warned her never to embarrass the family, and Sophie knew better than to go against her mother's wishes. Henry, now persuaded by Ellen's words, reluctantly agreed to take Lily out on a date. Though his mind lingered on Sophie, this would be the start of a complicated web of lies, jealousy, and deceit that would further entrap Sophie in a life she never wanted. Little did she know, her path was about to take an even more unexpected turn. As the days passed, Henry and Lily's relationship blossomed, though Sophie's heart felt heavier with each moment. Watching Lily, her younger sister, now showered with attention from a man who seemed so different from the life she had known, was a cruel reminder of her own isolation. Sophie couldn't escape the growing ache in her chest. A feeling of being invisible. As if the bond she had once shared with her family had dissolved into nothingness. Lily boasted to her friends about Henry's wealth, enjoying the spotlight that her relationship with him brought her. It was a world Sophie had never been a part of, and it only deepened the sense of alienation she felt. Meanwhile, Clara, who had always been a little more observant than Lily, began to notice the attention Henry was paying to Sophie. Something about him had intrigued her, and the more she watched him with Lily, the more she became dissatisfied with the situation. It wasn't just the fact that Lily was getting everything she wanted, but the way Henry looked at Sophie had left Clara feeling envious. Clara wasn't the type to back down from what she wanted, and she had always been accustomed to getting her way. Her jealousy over Lily's relationship with Henry festered, and she began to devise a plan. One evening, when Lily was out, Clara decided it was time to make her move. She showed up uninvited at Henry's house, bringing with her a basket of food, acting sweet and casual as if they had known each other for years. Henry, surprised but not unfriendly, let Clara in. Over time, Clara charmed him with her persistence and sultry smile, and before long, she had successfully seduced him. Clara, now secretly involved with Henry, felt a rush of triumph. She knew that by getting close to him, she was making Lily's situation more complicated. However, her actions set into motion a series of events that would spiral out of control, leading to a chaos neither sister could have anticipated. The truth of the affair would soon be revealed in a shocking and painful way. One evening, while Lily was out with friends, Clara came face to face with Henry in a way that would change everything. Their relationship, hidden from Lily and everyone else, was about to unravel in a shocking confrontation. Meanwhile, Sophie was caught in the crossfire of these tangled lies. She had hoped to keep her distance from everything, to stay quiet and out of the drama. But it wasn't possible anymore. Her family had become a battleground of lies, deceit, and betrayal. She was tired of feeling like a ghost in her own life. A shadow who did nothing but clean up after everyone else. Despite everything, she still longed for the affection and love she had once known in her childhood. But it seemed so far away now. Ellen, too, seemed to be oblivious to the growing rift between her daughters. Focusing only on what she could control, she encouraged Lily's relationship with Henry, believing that it would bring the family wealth and status. At the same time, she dismissed any sign of affection for Sophie, instead forcing her into the role of the family servant. Sophie's isolation deepened. The idea of being married to a poor taxi driver, as her mother had arranged, seemed like the only way out of the house that had become a prison to her. Ellen had arranged for her to marry a man named Patrick, someone who, though kind, was far beneath the social status that Lily and Clara enjoyed. Sophie, devastated by her mother's cruelty, accepted the proposal, believing it was her only way to escape the nightmare her life had become. But the events that followed would reveal that life had other plans for Sophie, and soon. Everything she thought she knew about her place in the world would change. Patrick, the man who had been set up as Sophie's future, was not what he seemed. And as the lies continued to spiral, Sophie found herself in the midst of a storm she couldn't avoid. One that would force her to make difficult decisions about her future and her place in a family that had once meant everything to her. The journey ahead would be filled with heartbreak, betrayal, and unexpected twists. But in the end, Sophie would discover a truth about herself that she could never have imagined. As time passed, Sophie's life took an unexpected turn. She had married Patrick, a man she once thought would be a means of escape. But her life with him turned out to be a gift she had never imagined. Patrick, who had hidden his true wealth from her, had a mansion waiting for her, filled with luxury and warmth, a stark contrast to the coldness she had experienced in her mother's house. With him, Sophie found love, respect, and happiness, the very things she had been denied for so long. Ellen, Lily, and Clara, on the other hand, found their world collapsing. Their lies had caught up with them. Lily's relationship with Henry ended in scandal, and Clara's deceit only deepened the rift between them. Agatha, now faced with the reality of her actions, was left alone with nothing but regret. She had pushed Sophie away, and in doing so, had lost the daughter who had once been her greatest joy. Sophie, now living a life she had once only dreamed of, stood beside Patrick, strong and confident. She had found her place in the world, not through the approval of others, but through the love and respect she had earned. As she looked at her family, the life she had left behind, she realized that she had learned the most profound lesson of all. True happiness comes from within. And the love we give is the love we receive in return. Thank you for following Sophie's journey. If you enjoyed this life story, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring videos. See you in the next video.